Hi, thanks so much for joining our webinar today. My name is Jessie Peterson. I'm the Director of Education here at SunRay Construction Solutions. SunRay secures $10 billion annually for GCs, subs, and suppliers. We're a national construction document service. Today's webinar is conducted by the wonderful Ryan Suit, a Virginia construction lien law expert. Today's webinar topic is what happens after I record my lien? How do I get paid? So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the fabulous Ryan.
All right, thank you for the introduction, Jesse. Good afternoon, everyone. As Jesse said, my name is Ryan Suit. I'm an attorney at Pender Coward in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And today's webinar is what happens after I record my lien? How do I get paid? So with that, we will jump right into it. All right, so during the webinar, if you have any questions, please use the chat box on the right. We'll get to these at the end. Please do not include any names or company names. Try and keep yourself anonymous, but we'll address these questions at the end. So on today's agenda, we will first go through a quick mechanics lien refresher. We'll discuss enforcing lien rights, the priority of liens in Virginia, payment or bonding off the lien, releasing liens, and then Jesse will talk a little bit further about SunRay's resources. So mechanics lien refresher. So this is just a review of the basics of mechanics liens in Virginia. Who can file a mechanics lien? It's any person performing labor or furnishing materials worth $150 or more. That's general contractors, subs, sub-subs, laborers, material men. If you work on a property and the value of your work is $150 or more, you can file a mechanics lien. So pretty much anyone who does work this day and age is going to do at least $150 worth. So just about anyone has the right to a mechanics lien in Virginia. Perfecting the lien requires some pretty strict requirements. These are very strictly enforced in Virginia. There's a lot of specific information required to identify the property and the work performed on it that must be provided in your memorandum of lien. There are also mailing and notice requirements that have to be followed, and the lien needs to specify the building or improvements worked on, as well as the land which is utilized by whatever building or improvement are performed on, just to ensure that the lien is 100% accurate. That's kind of the gist of this and all I'm going to discuss right now, but if you have other questions, you can check out my prior webinars that I've done with SunRay, or feel free to reach out to me directly. The biggest thing with mechanics liens in Virginia is the timeline. Not following the timeline for recording your liens is by far the easiest way to lose your lien rights. A mechanics lien in Virginia needs to be filed within 90 days from the last day of the month that the last work was performed. So for example, if you finish a job today on April 16th, 2025, you have 90 days from April 30th, the last day of this month, to file a mechanics lien. However, Virginia also has the 150-day rule, which means the liens only look back 150 days prior to the last day of work. So in my example, if you finished a job today and then timely filed a mechanics lien, the lien could only cover work performed 150 days prior to April 16th, which comes out to be November 17th of 2024. So that's, again, another important thing to remember, because if your lien is not 100% accurate, it could be dismissed by a court and not fully enforced. Finally, kind of the key point of today's webinar is that you must enforce a properly recorded lien within 6 months of recording the lien, or within 60 days of when the project is finished or terminated, whichever is later, or according to the statute, whichever time shall last occur. That's really, if you remember anything from today, that's the sentence to recall, because that's really today's PowerPoint in a nutshell. But we will continue talking about enforcing your lien rights. Again, just to reinforce the last sentence from that last slide, a mechanics lien must be enforced within 6 months from the time the lien is recorded, or within 60 days after completion or termination of a project. These are hard deadlines that must be complied with. If you don't move to enforce a lien within these timeframes, the lien is no longer enforceable and you lose your lien rights, period. Like I said at the start, Virginia strictly enforces the requirements for mechanics liens, and the timeline absolutely has to be complied with. Now, when you move to enforce your lien rights, it's done by filing a petition with the court. Again, you have to ensure timeliness. With mechanics liens in Virginia, timing is everything. Many states have different timelines and case law decisions on when a petition is implemented and what implemented means. For example, in Vermont, Vermont says that there's a certain amount of time to initiate the enforcement of a mechanics lien. But there, that means that the hearing for an enforcement action actually has to take place before the deadline. So in this Vermont example, you can't just file suit on the last day of the enforcement period. That would be too late. Virginia is not that strict. So in Virginia, under Virginia Code Section 43-17, it specifically states that filing a petition is the institution of an enforcement suit for a mechanics lien. So in Virginia, you can wait to file a petition to the last day of that 6-month period after recording the lien, or on the 60th day following the completion of the project, and either would be okay. One thing of note with enforcing your liens in Virginia is that the code section specifically requires that it be initiated with a petition rather than a complaint or some other type of pleading. That's more of an issue for your attorney, but just something to be made aware of. Now, when you file your petition, there are a number of specific requirements for information that has to be included in it, such as itemized statements of accounts, detail of the work that was performed, the material or the materials furnished, any payments that were made or not made, and the balance due. The judge then reviews the petition. A hearing is held for that, and the judge will go through all that information to make sure that the lien is valid and enforceable. Assuming that the lien is valid and enforceable and meets all the statutory requirements, a judge can then enforce the lien by setting a judicial foreclosure sale. A judicial foreclosure sale is exactly what it sounds like. It is a foreclosure sale held by a judge. If the foreclosure sale is held and the property sells, which is sometimes the caveat, then the lien will be paid off with the proceeds from the sale. If the judge decides, taking a step back, if the judge were to decide that the lien is not valid or not enforceable or at all inaccurate, that is grounds for the lien to be dismissed and released from the property, and you would not be able to collect on it. So getting into payments of liens or bonding off of liens. Always make sure that you have a release and do not formally release your lien until payment's made. A release that is something that needs to be signed by all parties, and you need to make sure you are paid before signing it. One thing that's often overlooked is confirming a method of payment for and in exchange for the release of a lien. But this is something that always needs to be locked down beforehand to avoid any disputes or delays or confusion. I always recommend certified funds of some kind. Wiring is pretty much always foolproof because the funds are there instantly. You don't want to allow some method of payment that would give an opportunity for the payer to claw back the funds, like a canceled or bounced check or something along those lines. That tends to be something we see more often, especially with transactions involving Venmo or Cash App. People will cancel their accounts or cancel their whatever account is tied to those virtual accounts, and then Venmo or Cash App or whatever app will claw back the funds from your bank account. So make sure to confirm the method of payment. Also, make sure the payment is made prior to the deadline to file a petition. You may trust someone and they may say, oh, we'll get this paid, don't worry about it, we'll have it by whatever date. But if they don't pay by the 60th day after completion or after the deadline, the 6-month deadline from when you file your lien in the first place, you need to file that petition and ensure your rights. You can always file it and then settle and remove whatever petition hearing from the docket. But if you miss that deadline to file and you haven't been paid, then you are out of luck as far as your lien and lose a lot of leverage in getting payment. So bonding off the lien is something that's usually done by companies or property owners that have a good amount of funds or large access to funds. The owner can either pay funds, liquid funds, into the court to have the lien released. That has to be in an amount sufficient to discharge the lien, or the owner can pay a bond that's twice the amount of the lien. This is in accordance with Virginia Codes 43-70 and 71. These companies usually utilize a surety for bonds, just because it can be a large amount of money. If it's a $300,000 lien or something along that, now you're talking over $500,000 for the bond. But once the bond or the funds are paid into the court, the petition proceeds as a normal lawsuit, and as I stated before, the judge will review the liens and look over it. And if it's valid and enforceable, the judge will hopefully disperse the funds accordingly. So one quick slide on the priority of liens. Something to take note of is what if there are other liens on the property on which you are filing a mechanics lien. Mechanics liens are powerful tools in Virginia and can often skip to the head of the line, so that they are the first in right to be paid off in case a property sells. So for example, if a property has $200,000 worth of liens on it, but then only sells for $100,000, a mechanics lien in Virginia is likely to get paid off first, because it, again, is a very powerful tool. This is not always the case. Deeds of trust, which is a Virginia term for mortgages, can be first in line, but mechanics liens are almost always ahead of judgment liens, and typically are paid first, but it's really a case-by-case basis. If you do have any questions on this or concerns about where your mechanics lien stands in line on a property, feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to answer any questions there. So once you get paid, when you actually need to release the lien, again, make sure you are paid before releasing the lien. Make sure those funds are in your account and can't be clawed back. But the release process is pretty simple. All that needs to be done is filing a release with the court in which the lien was recorded. One thing to remember is that if you are, for whatever reason, let's say you miss your deadline to enforce the lien, or you were paid and the lien is still on the property, there are potential consequences to that. An owner can file a petition to challenge a lien and bring a claim for attorney's fees and costs, and potentially sanctions as well. So this might seem, again, I said there was a simple step, but it's one that should not be overlooked to make sure that there aren't any penalties that you could be subject to. That's really the gist of today's webinar. I do want to add a few words to the whys just at the end. Just in general, some advice. Always double check your contract. If you haven't looked through your contract recently and you have a template that you use on all your projects, go back and reread it. Times change, things change, and you want to make sure that your contract is up to date. Also, make sure that your licensure is accurate and up to date. You would never believe how many companies don't realize that they missed a $50 payment and are no longer registered with the state or whatever licensing board, and that can have potential issues and consequences if you run into any disputes or lawsuits. Another thing with contracts is make sure that you state your scope of work in progress payments with specificity. One of the most common disputes I see is contractors not saying, here is when I'm going to get paid on X day, or when I complete this part of the project. And that is such a common issue that you want to make sure that, again, if you have a template, make sure that scope of work is fully spelled out. One other thing to check is make sure your mechanics liens rights are not waived by any other contract. If you sign a contract, there can be a very subtle clause in there that can waive your right. Say, if you apply for payment, you are waiving your right to a mechanics lien. It's a pretty common thing that you see, but you want to make sure that you're aware of that so that you aren't filing frivolous mechanics liens down the line if you're not paid, because you may have waived your mechanics liens right. This could be a much bigger subject, and I won't go off on a tangent. But if you run into that issue, just remember it's okay, because a mechanics lien is a specific creature of statute in Virginia, but it is not your only means of recovering payment. You can always sue for breach of contract.
Thank you. Here are some of SunRay's resources to help you stay organized, know your deadlines, and secure your lien rights. So go ahead and scan that QR code to access these incredible resources. Please note that every state, as Ryan said, has different lien laws, deadlines associated, and different types of documents required. So please go on our website. You can check out what state you're doing work in, and then what the laws are in that state for your role on that job, and it will help you stay in the know of what you need to get sent out and when. All right, and then the next slide, please. All right, our next webinar with Ryan about Virginia's lien law is going to be getting paid faster with liens, bonds, and contracts. That's going to be Wednesday, October 8th. So please register for free at sunraynotice.com/education. We'd love to be able to see you guys there. All right, and then the next slide, please. All right, if you don't mind, give us a moment of your time, scan that QR code to give us some feedback. We really do appreciate all the feedback that you guys can provide to us. It helps us better our webinars and our services available for you. All right, and then the next slide, please. All right, and with that, that is all we have for you guys today. Thank you so much to everybody who attended. We hope to see you at our next webinar. Again, Ryan, you really are incredible. Thank you so much for your time and all the information you were able to provide. I hope you all have a beautiful and wonderful sunny day. Bye, everyone. Thanks again.